Okay, so um, I've got a fun one today, and I kind of wanted to share this and record it for him as well as anyone else that's curious. Super nice guy reaches out to me, says, hey, I've got some issues with a fuel-only setup, sends me a data log, and as I start looking through it, he comments that, hey, look, I've got issues with kind of lean surging. It's actually the opposite of that, but he's got some issues with cruising. You can kind of see here's a good example of this as well. As he's going along, he's cruising at, or idling maybe even, just at basically 1300 RPM. Not too much going on there that's crazy at all. Fairly okay map, but the AFRs are just kind of pretty steady there. And all of a sudden it triggers AFR. Or sorry, triggers acceleration pulse width. So you can see that kind of picking up in there. It goes a little bit crazy and it starts to toss in way too much fuel. Look at the pulse width. So it triggers the acceleration pulse width right here. You can see the pulse width is at 2.162. That's a pretty reasonable item right there. But immediately goes to 4.6. It just starts flooding it. If you watch the AFRs, because there's always a lag there, so here's the yellow line. I'm about 15, which is a decent cruise. And then it just tanks all the way down to 11s. And then it recovers. And then the TPS triggers it again, and it just tanks, and it just starts doing this little cycle. And he's going to feel that. I mean, just watch that AFR. It just goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Not smooth at all. And a lot of it's being triggered by acceleration pulse width. So that's the first thing we need to fix. So if I come in here to his tune, here is his tune kind of pulled open. I just pulled it open a minute ago. But if I come in and I take a look at your, let's do your time-based acceleration enrichment, we'll start there. The wide open throttle one, I won't worry about that right now. He's got a TPS dot threshold of 25. And you know what? I'd probably bring that up a little bit based on his setting and how that is. I'd probably start that out at maybe like 40 or 50. So I'd go ahead and put that in there. I'd kick that off as a good setup there. I'd also come in here and say the amount that it's adding. So you've got TPS dots all the way up until, 210, and it's adding basically 2 milliseconds. Well, maybe bring this down to more of reasonable of what's going on there and start tapering it a little bit. But that's too much. It probably needs to be a little bit closer to about half of what it was. I don't even know if it will let me do some of those, but let's try something along those lines. At least get them started, and I'd do something like that. Okay, so that's probably where I'd start off with. That is just ridiculous. I don't even think he ever gets that close. On his data log, his highest TPS dot was 404 per second. So even if I come in here, this scale is just kind of crazy. I'd probably do 2, maybe 300, maybe 400, and I'd do 600 possibly. Sorry. Hopefully that doesn't pick up on the camera too loud. But I'd probably do something like that. And at least then when you click off, it's a little bit more of a reasonable setup. Even then, I'd probably come in here, maybe even kick that one to 1,000. Just because it was so high before, it was just, oops, 0. There we go. That's more reasonable. So here's kind of the setup of kind of what I would be looking for. It's got a mild curve to it, but nothing too crazy. That way, as you're pegging it at low RPM, it's going to dump in that throttle that's needed and hopefully not kill it. We can raise that threshold. The other thing I'm looking at, so that would be the first steps of settings of what I'm looking for here. Next step, though, is going to be looking at this TPS itself. So let's say I kind of cruise on back. He might be kind of moving that throttle around a little bit and kind of causing it, but let's say we go back to areas where he's having a little bit into it. So he kind of gets into it, and you can see kind of these fluctuations in there in his throttle as he's kind of rolling into it. Look at what that's doing with the acceleration pulse width. I mean, my goodness. Now, I'm kind of keeping in that trigger. You'll notice right there, our TPS dot, 31, okay? Perfect. 231. So that 40 is kind of there. It would have actually triggered at this point. So TPS dot isn't, well, that's negative. Dang it. Let me look for a positive one. Kind of not really getting it. He's just rolling into the throttle. I wouldn't expect too much there. Here is where TPS dot does kind of jump, because he starts giving a little more back. So 108, that would be a true acceleration wizard. Enrichment popping it in, that's perfect. Okay, so one of the next things I would do is I'd go back into the tune, and I would come in there and I would say, hey, I'm going to go back to your basic load and settings. I'm going to go to the general settings, and right here where you have your TPS lag factor, I would drop this down. You notice the lower you go down, the more smooth it is. I would probably say, you know what, let's bring it down to maybe a 40 and try that out and see if that helps smooth it out. Really, I don't want to go too crazy, but the TPS is a little bit too sensitive at the moment, and it's causing some false readings. So really what you should see, and granted, he's riding a freaking V8, so as it's driving around, it really could be just shaking his foot a little bit and getting him all out of place. But first step first, this acceleration wizard, it's just got to be fixed. That's just stupid. How the car is going to be so frustrating to drive. It'd probably sound interesting, but it'd be just so infuriating to drive it with the acceleration wizard constantly kicking on and off, ruining your day. I mean, the AFR is just pegged at pretty much dead rich in this area right here. So, woof. Okay, so acceleration wizard, get that taken care of with those steps that I just showed. Get that dropped out of there. The one other thing I did see, which I was concerned about, but not too concerned about, and as you tune it, it becomes less of an issue. I am noticing that the ego settings, I'll use ego correction. You're going to see this ego correction is white. That's one. Let me, was it two? I know it's bringing it. Okay, so here's where ego correction starts to kind of kick in certain places. You can see it drop, raise, drop, kind of in there. I think we're going to have some fun here after he gets this change with the acceleration wizard. I get to help him out. Anyway, hopefully this makes sense. This is kind of the steps I go through. One of the very first things when I open this up is I go in here, I select on some of the drop downs, and I start looking for things that look out of place. So as I highlight over the acceleration pulse width, or if I start bringing down things, I go to trouble areas, and then I start just filming through the different types of key items to find whichever one it is that's causing the issues. And so in this case, I think the acceleration pulse width was the biggest issue by far. Ego's coming into play. There is an issue. You'll notice it right off the top. We've got a huge RPM spike. That happened near the beginning. Oh, there it is. So here's this RPM spike. My guess is there's something going on there, which I'll kind of work with him on. But there's either the wires that are, picking up are not shielded. So whatever your TAC reference is might not be a shielded wire, or you have spark wires that got jostled around and are too close to your basically your RPM sensor. So that kind of needs to be adjusted next. But anyway, that's part one. Hopefully we'll see how things go, and I'll work with him to get the rest taken care of and adjusted. Anyway, stay tuned. By the way, if you ever have anything fun, you've got a data log and a Megasquirt file or Speedwino file you want me to take a peek at, kind of do a quick little video, I'm more than happy to. I just kind of knock them out from time to time during my lunch. So I find it fun and entertaining. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. Have a great one.